All right, guys. So Congress is talking about reparations. Okay. And this is the Biden administration's first attempt to study reparations. And I have to laugh because this is always how the reparations conversation goes, right? It's always we got to study reparations. Okay. And what the super liberals don't understand is that they can demand reparations all they want. But the most that they're ever going to get, realistically, right, because of the way our political system works, is just a study. That's the most that you're going to get, right? The study's going to tell you everything that you already believe. You were wronged, and that slavery drove the U.S. economy and produced, billions to $1 trillion of wealth for this country in current economic terms. That's what you're going to be told, okay? So anytime Democrats always want to talk about reparations, they always throw that study in there to keep the super liberals on the hook. Okay, that's all it's for, because they're not going to actually do it, right? And that's one of the reasons why I really don't like the reparations conversation, right, in the black community, because I just feel like it's a conversation that doesn't really have a practical solution, right? And I think it's one of those things that's just being used by the Democrat, right, dangling some beef. Right? Hey guys, vote for us. You might get reparations. We said we're gonna study it. That's essentially what the equivalent is. So I just feel like people are just better off not even like considering it to be a possibility, right? And moving forward with life and trying to take advantage of the immense opportunities that there are right now in society. That's just my opinion on it. But Kim Klacik and Richard Fowler are gonna go back and forth, and they're gonna debate about reparations. And I must say, Kim Klacik brought the heat to this debate, and I want you guys to check it out because I thought she did excellent. She really destroyed this guy.
Issue is getting its first serious consideration under the Biden-Harris administration through a bill that was introduced by Democrat Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and it was debated in the House. Watch this.
Now more than ever, the facts and circumstances facing our nation demonstrate the importance of H.R. 40 and the necessity of placing our nation on the path to reparative justice.
Reparations is not the way to right our country's wrong. If we're sincere about repaying Black Americans for our loss, let's give us back our history.
Kimberly Klacik joins us now. She's the president of Red Renaissance, and Richard Fowler, senior fellow at the New Leaders Council and Fox News contributor. Good to have both of you with us today. Richard, let me start with you. You hear the back and forth, and I guess the question is slavery in America the reason that we have racial disparities today, or is it coming from something else?
Well, I definitely think that slavery is the reason why we have racial disparities today. And I think it's really important for us to look back at history, Martha, and see what we can learn. And here's what we do know. In 1988, Ronald Reagan passed a law allocating $1.6 billion to Japanese Americans in reparations because they were in internment camps during World War II. That was for one war. Right? That wasn't for 200 years of slavery. That wasn't for Jim Crow. That was just for one war. What H.R. 40...
See, they love to use the argument about how, the Jews got reparations right after the Holocaust, by the way. The Japanese got reparations for World War II, which was only, 30 or 40 years earlier? Right? I mean, it was still during a time in which you could trace back exactly who was affected. Okay, who was wrong? You can thoroughly trace that. Okay, and guys, I would be for reparations if this was Reconstruction, right? When you knew exactly who was negatively affected, right? So much time has passed from slavery to today that to me personally, in order for it to be reparations, you can't skip the question of who was wronged and who did the wrongdoing. Okay, you can't just gloss over that, because most of the arguments, the pro reparations arguments, are moral arguments, right? They're not practical arguments, right? They don't have a real practical solution for how to do it, because the person that did the wronging has to pay, and the person that was wronged needs to get paid back. Okay, if you can't directly, at the very least, trace who was wronged, right, definitively, and put an economic number on it, then reparations is not possible. What you're talking about at that point is not reparations anymore. What you're talking about is a redistribution of wealth. And that's fine. If you want a redistribution of wealth, just say, hey, I want a redistribution of wealth, but don't say it's reparations. Listen, I'm against, a mass redistribution of wealth at that scale. But like I said, my thing is this. I would rather you call it what it is than to try to pretend that, you're righting a wrong, because you're not righting a wrong anymore. Because there have been no proposals on how to trace who is affected. If you're just giving everybody that is black, $300,000 or whatever, again, that you're giving money to people who weren't affected.
It doesn't cut checks to black Americans. What it says is, let's study the ideal of reparations. Let's study the economic impact of enslavement. Does it have precursors? Does it have impact in today's society? And what are the economic outcomes of that? And what should we do about it as a nation? And I don't understand why we can't pull up the rug and actually have a conversation and do a study about the impact of enslavement.
I don't know
on
about
America.
you, but when I hear that an administration is going to do a study, to me that's like, okay, well, we'll talk about it later. It's because it's just sort of an appeasement move to say we're going to do a study. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this will actually lead to something, but that seems to be where it is right now. Kimberly, the same question to you. Are the racial issues that we have in this country, do they go back to slavery, or is it something else that is more evident or more the reason for what we see today?
Well, I agree with Richard. You have to look at history here. I mean, let's be honest. Slavery happened across the world, and it was tragic, but we have to look at what happened after the fact. First, you have to determine who pays for what, right? Out of 13 states that joined the Confederacy, you had 28% of black Americans in those states that actually owned black people as well. They were slave owners. Then you had the Cherokee.
Okay, let me stop. So Kim Klacik is going to bring some heat here. Now, the first point that she brings up about the 28% of, I think, free blacks had slaves or something like that. Statistic that she brings up there, honestly, I tried to look it up. I don't know if it's true, but her overall point is true, right? In the sense that there were black slave owners. You guys should read about William Ellison, okay, who was a slave owner in the South, right? A pretty brutal slave owner at that, right? Free black man owned slaves. And he wasn't just the only one. There were quite a bit of black slave owners, but yet, see, that's never mentioned. Nobody ever wants to talk about that. Because again, when it comes to this reparations argument, all of a sudden, a lot of these people, right, that want reparations, when they pass this reparations law, that $300,000 that a lot of these people want, instead of getting that $300,000, somebody might show up and say that you owe the government some money, right? You owe some reparations because your family was involved in slavery. They were slave owners. And see, that's a part of the reparations conversation. That question has to be answered, because if you want to make it right, then there's black people that's going to have to pay, right? Like that, it is what it is. Some Indian people are going to have to pay. You're going to have to go to the Native Americans and say, pay up. You own some black slaves. Again, this is why it's important to answer these questions. Because you want to talk about history. You want to open up history books. Again, the narrative ain't just that all slaves were owned by white folks and that's it. That's just not how it went down.
Indians and other Indian tribes that also own black people. And so when you look at the numbers today, you only find 5% of white people that are generationally connected to slavery. So are you asking that 5% to take on that burden? And then secondly, you have to prove the fact that slavery is the reason that some black people are struggling today and others are not. Like Richard and myself, we don't live below the poverty line. But back in the 1940s, you had 80% of black people living below the poverty line. By the you got to the 1960s, you only had 47% living below the poverty line, and we were able to make that jump without reparations. So you have to really look at what's going on here, because in 1965, when they introduced the welfare state, I think that's what is to blame for the problem that we see today. When you ask the black woman to marry the government rather than marrying the father of her children, we started to see the decline. And I think it is the broken family structure and the poor education system, in my opinion.
Woo-wee! You can tell she been reading some Thomas Sowell, some Walter Williams. You know what I'm saying? She read this book right here. Basic economics. She read this book right here. That's the book she read. Right? And then she read this one right here. Discrimination and Disparities, right? She read these books. Okay, you can tell she did her homework, okay? Because she just destroyed this man with facts and logic. Also, you can tell that Martha, she was enjoying this. She was eating this up. Martha was eating it up, boy. She was smiling and smirking like, you right, Kim. You right. They married the government. You damn right. They are incentivizing marrying the government and not the man. Martha was all into it. She loved it. Okay, what essentially she's saying is that some of the incentive structures that we have in regards to the welfare system has encouraged a lot of women, right? And it's not just something that applies to black women, but just in general, has encouraged certain women to marry the government, right? And when you marry the government, what happens is that you stay married to the government. There is rarely any divorce from the government because the incentive structure is to stay with the government. Okay, and because of this, what happens is that these women are kind of forced into poverty to a certain extent, right? That the child poverty rate for single black mothers is 30%. And the poverty rate for married black couples is below 10%, right? That's something that we know. Again, these are just facts, right? Marriage is really the poverty solution here. And again, this is my main argument against reparations. Everybody's trying to figure out why the net worth of the black community is basically going to zero. Well, the reason why is because, one, lack of proper structure in the home, one, a father and a mother, and financial literacy, right? Those two things, financial literacy and proper family structure, can solve every single problem in the black community. It's really that simple. It's in terms of solving the net worth problem, which is ultimately cited there was economic gain that was stolen from us during slavery. And that's why white people are ahead. That's essentially the argument. But we already know that marriage cures poverty. Basically, we know that without the government, marriage cures poverty. All you need on top of that is financial literacy. Financial literacy on top of that is the next best thing you need. And that's available on the internet. You don't even got to go to the library to get that. You can go on YouTube and learn financial literacy. Again, all the resources are available. And to me, I feel like, we'd be better off using those resources and building up for ourselves rather than getting a $300,000 payout that we have no idea what to do with. All of it essentially is going to go back to the government and the white folks, right? Like that's essentially how it's going to happen because most people are going to spend it on Amazon. They're going to spend it on, fancy cars, fancy clothes, fancy shoes, things like that. It's going to go right back to where it came from. Kim Klacik, man, she came with a fire here, and there was no response from these guys.
For sure, there's a lot there. Go ahead, respond.
There's definitely a lot there to unpack.
That's what you say when you don't have a response.
But I think it's really important, like Kim said, to go back in history. And if Ronald Reagan in 1988 could do it for the Japanese Americans after one war, less than a decade worth of time, then I think it's important for us as in a country to say, what is the real impact of enslavement? The idea that in 1865, we said you're free and you can go, and we didn't deal with the roots of slavery, the idea that you had no culture, no identity.
But what about the argument that Kimberly makes? I just want you to address one of the things that she said head on, which is how do you figure out who actually has to do that, right? You've got this smaller percentage of people who have any connection to the families that actually did that. Why should families who had no connection to that whatsoever have to pay for what happened with what their ancestors did a long, long time ago?
Martha asked that question because she wanna know if Richard think that she got to pay reparations. She's like, listen, before you leave, I just want to know, do you think I got to pay reparations? Do I got to cut a check? That's what I want to know. We already know you can't respond to her. Okay, we already know you ain't got nothing for that. You ain't got nothing for it. I just want to know, do I got to pay?
That's a great question, Martha. And in 1865, General Sherman had the answer. He said he wanted to allocate confiscated land from traders to slaves. And one year that was reversed. So I think what the place to start is, where was that confiscated land? What's the value of that confiscated land? And how do we reallocate the value of that land to the American people, saying the government made the decision to take that land away after a government
order. And then
it
was overruled, as you say. All right, it's a big topic. Richard and Kimberly, thank you very much. Good to have both of you with us today.
Yeah, Kim Klacik wrecked on this. She absolutely wrecked. He had no response. He had no response for her. So, yeah, man, reparations debate. They gonna talk about studying it the same way they do all the time, and then, you know, in another 4 years they'll be studying it again. So we'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.